Well, with that, let's call this meeting to order.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with that, I'll make a motion to approve the January 27th regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And I'll make a motion to approve the January 27th non-public meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Oh, yeah. One abstention.
And finally, I will make a motion to approve the February 6th budget public hearing minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Announcements. The Select Board will meet on the following dates at 5 p.m. Monday, February 24th, Monday, March 10th, and Monday, March 24th. Some additional important dates to remember. Town elections will be held at Plymouth Elementary School from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, March 11th. And that will lead into the town meeting, which will also be at Plymouth Elementary School at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, March 12th. So Tuesday, town elections all day, followed by a town meeting on Wednesday, the 11th and the 12th. Town offices will be closed on February 17th in observance of Washington's birthday. Any citizens wishing to be listed on the Select Board's agenda should notify Town Hall before noon the Thursday before the scheduled meeting, and all meetings are held here in Town Hall, also by Zoom, and the Zoom information can be found on the town's website at plymouthnh.gov. I happened to run into this myself. When we did the budget hearing on last Thursday, we didn't attach the Zoom information to that meeting.
To the posting?
Yeah. And is there any way other than the calendar posting to get to the Zoom connection information, or do you have to go to the calendar posting?
Well, you can go into the select board agendas.
Is it on the agendas? Could we add a link maybe on the Select Board's page or something like that?
Sure. I don't see why not.
Yeah, because I always like, I got to find a previous event, and anyway, it was a small thing. Chairman's comments. I wanted to make a brief announcement that we have signed a 3-year extension with Scott Whedon to continue on as our town manager, which I'm personally could not be happier about the relationship and the job that Scott has done since taking over here as town manager for the town of Plymouth. It's been amazing working with you, and I'm looking forward to at least one more year personally, but certainly 3 more years as a citizen in this town. So thanks, Scott. Really glad to
Second that.
We say here, here.
Here, yeah,
Here.
here. Absolutely. I love it.
Phil.
That's it for my comments. So I will hand to Scott to give us an update on town.
Sure. Thank you, Zach. First is the Loon Lake Road culvert. The Loon Lake Road culvert replacement will occur during the summer of 2025. This will be going out to construction bid during the 2nd week of February. We have been able to obtain temporary easements in order to reroute the traffic during construction. The purpose of closing down Loon Lake Road and rerouting traffic is the cost savings of approximately $40,000 and limit it to a 3-week construction time frame. If we do not close the road, it would require a temporary bridge to be installed and a longer time frame for the project. I will make sure that I am in contact with the folks out on Chason Road and out on Loon Lake Road, periodically checking in with them to see if they have any concerns, or comments on that.
So how does the rerouting work? How does the rerouting work? Loon Lake is so...
So it's going to travel down the power line to Thompson Lane out to Quincy Road, and then coming back towards Fairgrounds Road.
Stay off there.
Steve and Mike Vignali were out there 2 weeks ago before we had all the snow, driving it, checking it, making sure, and it's very passable.
Great, thank you.
Welfare report for January 2025. During the month of January, Mary Ann worked on 31 cases that were received. The cases range from assistance with rent, electricity, heat, water and sewer invoices, and housing. As I review Mary Ann's report and speak with her weekly, the cases become more complex. As a result, she has updated the welfare guidelines that we will go through tonight. Mary Ann and I visited the Bridge House on Thursday, January 23rd for a tour with Sean Doherty, the executive director. Again, Mary Ann is diligent while being compassionate about resolution and facilitating assistance for those in need and qualify. And I can say over the last week, Ann and I have met with Mary Ann on a few occasions with some of those complex cases, working through those. And the guideline updates that Ann will present tonight cover some of those difficulties that we're experiencing with those that are applying for welfare. Town of Dorchester, Chief Pierce and I met with the Dorchester Select Board on Thursday, January 30th, to discuss their request for an ambulance contract with the town of Plymouth. We had a very positive discussion, and this will be included in their town meeting budget for this year. Plymouth State University, I met with Jess Dutile today, Tuesday, February 10th. We discussed an upcoming meeting with the Cabinet and Community Council to meet. Possible date will be Monday, April 28th, to meet with the Cabinet and hold a Community Council meeting that same evening. The Safety Joint Loss Management Committee, the committee met on Tuesday, January 28th. The committee reviewed loss information, accidents, incidents, and near misses. Workers' compensation, there were 4 claims reported with no expenses incurred, reported only. Property casualty, there were 3 claims reported, all 3 involved vehicle operations. One was a police claim with a collision with a deer. Ambulance had a collision with the rock and collision with the station bay door. The committee did discuss all claims. Departments provided updates, and Jesse provided an overall facilities update with regards to work orders that he's received, completed, and initiated. Highway Department, we're happy to report that the Highway Department is full staff, including a mechanic who will be starting on Monday, February 18th. Steve will be researching the idea of having the mechanic work on other department vehicles, if appropriate, as a cost-saving measure. Recycling, some good news from recycling. The town received our environmental impact report, which highlights some of the positive impacts generated from our recycling efforts last year. Aluminum, 16,136 pounds. Glass, 1,604,380,000 pounds. Paper and or cardboard, 334,613 pounds. Steel cans, 22,260 pounds. And tires was 14,360 pounds. So a great effort by the Recycling Center, and was acknowledged by Northeast Resource Recovery, which we do business with. Our IT conversion from CCS to Connections Suzor has been successful. We met with Connections and Suzor on Friday, January 31st, for the final phases of conversion that were implemented on Saturday, February 1st. We do have a couple additional meetings with them this upcoming week. House Bill 625, an act relative to enabling municipalities to levy payments against nonprofits at a percentage of their assessed property value of 25%. Vice Chair Bolton did introduce this into the legislature. Was heard last Thursday, Bill, is that correct? I don't know if you want to give an update on that now, or?
I could. So it was before the Municipal and County Committee, and there was quite a few negative responses I received, not necessarily from that committee. They still have to think about it and exec on it, but there's been a lot of emails that I've received that were concerned about how, thank you, you want to just hold it, how that their nonprofits will be affected by, this, well, the problem is, In fact, most recently, I got one from Ashland, and it was the woman that runs the historical building, and she was quite concerned that, they're going to be on the chopping block, and I kind of indicated that this may not be a bill that's going to pass, but what it will do is start a conversation, and there might be a better solution for it coming in next year. There are a lot of people that are interested in reforming it, so we'll see where that goes. But the woman from Ashland was quite concerned. So, and for those that have very low-key nonprofits that may be easily on the chopping block, I could see where it does bring concern. But generally, the towns that will be putting this into some kind of ordinance pretty much have sympathy and compassion for the low-hanging fruit of the nonprofits that wouldn't survive if they had to pay 25% of the municipal rate. So I don't know. It may not go this year, but but it's not too far in imagination to think that it might not. I mean, it may go ahead and pass. So
I think
then in the Senate, it will die.
Right. And I think the important part is we did follow through with the request that was made at March town meeting last year to pursue this, and you did your due diligence and entered it into legislation to be heard, and I think we fulfilled that commitment of taking that forward.
And there was a woman in town, Elaine Balkus, who actually helped quite a bit in identifying those towns that had a large population of nonprofits, and she queried like 7 or 8 towns, and that was very helpful in construction of the bill and speaking about it. So, and those towns are Berlin, Hanover, Concord, Lebanon, Durham, and there were like 5 that were very interested in going forward with it. So I want to thank Scott for getting the message out as well on his tree.
I know a lot of letters were sent down electronically, so,
Yeah.
in support of the bill.
That's great.
When you say nonprofits, you are not including schools or
Okay.
college?
Schools are not exempt from this. I mean, obviously, if we took up as an the city of Concord has 2 school systems in their city.
Okay.
One pays a 35% pilot, the other pays a 30%.
Those private schools?
I believe they're public.
Public schools,
Yeah.
okay.
And we would be kind of self-serving if we were to pass it and then assess that on our elementary school.
Right.
But the high school would definitely, we would be able to, I believe, and participate in that.
And what about colleges?
So the University System of New Hampshire and the all churches and properties owned by the church are not covered by this bill because they are protected by other federal laws. So.
How about the armory?
So that's, I mean, let it play out. Should it pass, the armory would be. I mean, there's a lot of other towns like Warren or something. They have like federal lands, and they can give it a shot. But I kind of doubt that they'd succeed against like White Mountain National Forest or that kind of stuff. But it should cover it because they're still offering services to those properties. So. And the armory as well. State property is also kind of covered by other, state laws too. And the agreement that, like, the armory made when they initially gave the property to Plymouth or loaned it, whatever it was, it didn't really have a good explanation of how we might receive it back. Which, when they were going to move out to Tenny Mountain Highway, the adjutant general refused to think that was going to come back to Plymouth gratis. So, but.
Weren't you also looking at like a dollar figure so it wouldn't, smaller nonprofits wouldn't be affected?
Well, 25% is,
Right, but you'd have to, be above a certain dollar
Oh,
threshold.
that could be in consideration. In fact, the bill leaves it to the town to decide a criteria for
Gotcha.
who
The actual
gets.
details of the pilot and how it would work.
It's not very specific as far as like, for nonprofits less than 50,000 or something like that. It would only be like $10, just, like something
Right.
that got a little too granular. So it's
Gotcha.
basically up to the town to decide how they would either.
And that would be a voted on thing for the town, or?
Many towns probably aren't going to take it up. They probably have a few nonprofits, and they're very pleased with them, like the Ashland Historical Society. I mean, that thing's not going to go anywhere.
Well, compared to the value of the Historical Society versus like a hospital, their value of that building is going to be much less than what a hospital would be.
Right.
So that really comes into play as well. So the size of it would be smaller, would be less that they would be paying.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
right.
Did you have testimony in opposition to the bill at the hearing?
Yeah, yep. And, had, testimony in favor of it too, not just me.
I'm sure that there are some municipalities that have a real high impact, like Plymouth and Concord.
Yeah, Berlin. We had the heaviest weighted nonprofit per capita, I guess, but, I think Berlin was the second. Concord may have been the third. Durham was up there too. So it was all between like 53 and 25. You know who really kind of stepped up, which was kind of very gratifying, was the New Hampshire Municipal Association. Because Nate Grays, who was the liaison between the municipalities and the legislature, he supported it, kind of helped me out initially, and then he took a job with BIA. So I was able to meet the new Nate, and it's Toby something or other. But I had a really good conversation with him like the day before. And I said, hey, this was all kind of laid out with Nate. I would appreciate your help. And we went through the whole thing, and he said, well, yeah, I'll tell Margaret that we're going to, go for this. And so the next day, he had some really great testimony. So
Good.
That's good.
that really sells it to a lot of, like, reps who represent towns. So, but that might help quite a bit. So,
Well, fingers crossed that it
yeah.
moves forward.
Now you have to sell your bill to the legislature.
So, sell it.
So,
Yeah, it's 400 reps. No, it'll probably go in perhaps again next year. So.
You're already accepting defeat before you.
That's right, that's what I was thinking.
planning for the future.
There's so many different alternatives too, besides this. Like, okay, now I'm just chatting too much about this, but whatever the nonprofit is, it helps like like an area. Like, how many towns does this nonprofit help? Well, if it's like 15 towns, then divide the value of 25% or whatever of the value of Plymouth, and then just bill them. Or in some states, the state actually pays for nonprofits, which is that.
That seems unlikely in this state.
Hey, don't give it up so easily.
I would just like the state to pay for education, and they don't want to do that. So,
You want to go into the first public hearing, and then I'll just finish up briefly after that?
yes, let's do that. All right. So we've got I'll open the public hearing.
Sorry.
We are holding a public hearing in accordance with RSA 3195B for the acceptance of unanticipated funds from the State of New Hampshire Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management in the amount of $11,812.50. The purpose of this grant is to update the town's hazard mitigation program. Scott, do you want to speak to this in addition to that?
Sure. So our hazard mitigation program expires in October of 2026. So the state likes to start well over a year in advance. So we have already filled out the paperwork. The board has signed the paperwork. This is the funds that came from them accepting our grant application. And I've reached out to Hubbard Consultant, who we have used in previous plans. And Jane Hubbard is willing to work with the town of Plymouth again. So what we would do if the board accepts these funds, is we would start start working on our hazard mitigation plan in October of 2025, moving for completion in October of 2026 to be accepted by the board and FEMA.
Sounds great. Does the 11,812, that covers the full cost, or is that like a match component?
There will be a portion of our cost. The total cost is around $9,000. They appropriated 11,812 based on what commonly is needed. But our expenditures will be about the program from this grant will be about $9,000.
Any questions from the public? Any questions from the board?
None.
All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing.
And I'll make a motion to accept the funds from the State of New Hampshire Division of Homeland Security and Hazard Management for the amount of $11,812.50 to update the town's hazard mitigation program.
Second.
It's on there.
Irene, you got it.
Who wants it?
You can have it.
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
I'll finish my
Yeah, please.
report. 2025 Candidate Night Forum will be held at Pease Public Library on February 20th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. I did include a handout in your packet, which covers the 2025 town election candidates. And for Select Board, Jason Ninos, Kostra Alexandropoulos, Philip Lamoureux, Neil McIver. For Moderator, Lad Rain. For Town Clerk, Amy Lee. For Tax Collector, Linda Buffington. For Supervisor of the Checklist, Mary Halloran. For Trustee of the Trust Fund, the 3-year term, Kevin Lincoln. For Trustee of the Trust Fund, 2-year term, Mark Halloran. And for Library Trustee, Amy Sullivan. And for Cemetery Trustee, Jenny Tebow. And with regards to candidate night, Mike Conklin, Kathy Kelsey, and Val Scarborough really are the candidate night organizers. And they did send out a message, which is on our website, was included in the newsletter, is that you are invited to participate in Candidate Night Forum to be held at Pease Public Library on Thursday, February 20th at 6:30 p.m. Each candidate will be asked to tell a little bit about themselves and why they would like to hold office. Then more general questions will be asked, some submitted by audience members, others drafted by the organizing committee. The event will be recorded by Pemmy Baker TV and also streamed live with a Zoom option. The session will last just for over an hour. This is a great opportunity for you to express your views, to meet your constituents, and for them to meet you. Please let us know if you're able to attend by contacting any of the organizing team. Thank you for your willingness to contribute your time and energy, to serve the town of Plymouth community. And that was a note that is going out or has gone out to those that are running for office.
Hey, Scott, were there any vacancies? Any vacant positions that weren't filled? Okay.
Scott, do you know if that group reached out to the school boards or water and sewer?
They did. So the message that's actually in the newsletter and on the website includes those that were running for school board.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Cool.
Important dates to remember, Zach covered those. Just a note, I'll be away from February 14th through February 21st. Employment opportunities, glad to say that we are down to filling two firefighter positions. Nate and Alex were able to provide a conditional offer of employment to a full-time police officer candidate over the weekend. So hopefully that position will be filled. And as always, if people have questions, concerns, or comments, my door is always open. My phone line is always open. Please call with any concerns, comments that you might have. And that concludes my report.
Perfect. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Any questions for Scott?
Nope.
All right.
Just one more thing, Zach, if I can. And I mentioned it last time. Plymouth State University is holding a blood drive on Monday, February 17th, from 11 to 4:30. It will be held at the Hartman Student Union Building at 17 High Street, and all community members are welcome. We have put this out in the lobby and on our bulletin boards, so hopefully folks will attend if they so choose.
Scott, one other question. The economic development consultant, the second one, when are they supposed to?
He was supposed to come in tonight, but that's been moved to April 14th due to a scheduling conflict that he had.
Is that Neil Cannon?
That's correct.
Okay.
But he will be here on April 14th.
Great, thank you.
All right. Do we want to look at the Pemmy Baker Manual of Policies and Procedures?
What was that one?
The Pemmy Baker,
Uh,
that's probably going to take more than.
More than the 5 minutes?
Yeah.
The
Okay.
welfare one.
Welfare
will not.
guidelines?
Welfare guidelines are quick.
That one gonna be quick?
Yeah, that will be quick.
Okay, let's do that one then.
Which one are we doing now?
The last 3 pages of this report, I'm sorry, I have to bring you all the way back there, is a memorandum from Marianne Peabody, who's our welfare director. She's requesting 2 amendments to the welfare guidelines. They are highlighted in your package. You should have gotten this over the weekend. One of the items is the standard of need when it comes to housing. We want to delete the last paragraph and replace it to read, the town of Plymouth uses the median gross rent posted by the HUD, by HUD for that given year. Your package will show comparisons between HUD, fair market value, that it depends on where you live in Grafton County as to what your level is. This will give her some discretion to use those median gross rents. The second item is the standard of need for emergency shelter. Add E to read, if a homeless person refuses a bed at a shelter because they will not surrender their dog and the dog is not trained certified service animal, then the town is not required to continue paying for their shelter. Recently, we've run into this at least twice that we know of, where people refuse to give up their animals. They are not certified or special trained, or in those instances, the town will not have any obligation to continue to assist them. Now, if the person is willing to give up their dog, we have been working with the New Hampshire Humane Society for that temporary time, where they will assist by taking care of the dog or the animal, so that this person still has a roof over their head. So we have been trying very hard to work towards that. And one of the reasons that this all came out is because the Bridge House, who is our homeless shelter here in town, no longer accepts pets. So we have to let people know that, yes, we have a room available or a bed available for you and your family or whatever is needed, but you cannot bring your animal in. And here's an option that you have to take care of your animal with that. There are some local hotels that allow people to take their animals, but that's really not a permanent shelter. You know, it's not a permanent location. And the shelter is here in Plymouth, and really does help Plymouth out quite a bit, but there's just, they will not take dogs anymore unless they're certified.
Emotional support animals, is that
They have
certified?
to have some.
They have to be certified.
They have to
Okay.
be certified by a specific doctor
Okay.
that says this person has to have this animal with them. So,
I mean, these are some of the complexities that we've seen
Sure.
over the last month, and this really clarifies and articulates within our guidelines what we can do for you. Because we do have options, like Ann said, with the New Hampshire Humane Society in Laconia that will take the dogs, because we do pay them an annual fee
Yep.
to take our stray animals and things of that nature that is handled by the police department.
So what we're just looking for is the board to approve these guidelines as amended tonight.
Okay, I'll make a motion to amend the welfare guidelines as presented by Ann to reflect the changes in red.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's a good one. All right, well, it's right at 5:30, so let's do another public hearing. Opening a public hearing in accordance with RSA 3195B for the acceptance of unanticipated funds from the Grafton County opioid settlement funds in the amount of $39,900. The purpose of this grant is to allow the Plymouth Police Department to purchase equipment utilized for the detection of opioids. And we've got Deputy Chief Buffington here to introduce this.
Thank you. Good evening. So this stems from actually some of the drug cases we were working last year. Back in October, I submitted a letter to the Grafton County Commissioners asking for access to some of the opioid settlement funds that they had. The purpose of that was to purchase, it's an Apex 7 drug detection device. So essentially, it's a handheld device that now we can show up on scenes. We no longer have to handle the fentanyl or any of the drugs that we come into contact with. It's kind of like you see on TV. It's a laser. It shoots through the bag, through the container. It will identify the substance, tell us what it is. It does explosive devices. It does precursors. So this is going to save us a lot of times. Currently, if we were to test drugs, we actually have to open the bag. We have to take some out, put it in another bag. Very unsafe. We're exposing our officers to hazards they shouldn't be doing. And so what this will do is we can now show up. If it was an overdose, we can now actually test the item and know what they took fairly quickly. So we're extremely thankful that the commissioners heard us and took this seriously and were able to issue us these funds. And so now we're asking the board to support us and accept the funds.
And those funds will be enough?
That's the exact amount, yep.
We have received the funding already, so we're just waiting for the board to tell us, go ahead and spend it.
Go.
What's the usual life cycle on a device like this? How soon does it need to be replaced?
I don't know the exact life cycle. It comes with, I think, 24,000 things in the library of substances that it will identify. It's currently what DEA uses, this actually exact device. It's kind of what you see on like the Border Patrol show or TSA. This is the same device that they use. They didn't give us a life cycle on it, so I can't imagine it's too quick. It's not something we use every day, but when we do come in contact with a substance, we'll definitely be using this as opposed to the old handheld, open the bag of drugs and try to test it that way. So.
Do you have a lab at the station? Will that apparatus be in the station, or will it be in the cruiser?
Yeah, so we'll probably keep it at the station or in a supervisor's vehicle. I don't know if we would keep it in a cruiser where it's cold all the time. We'd probably keep it in, and then if we get called to an overdose or to any type of scene like that, we would take it with us there and probably leave it at the police department. So it's expensive. I don't know if I'd want to leave it out in the cold below freezing. So if we can keep it inside, I think we'll do that and just take it with us.
And I think it's important to note that this comes on the heels of a case that was just handled by Plymouth PD and conviction out of Grafton County Superior Court for the death of someone for selling fentanyl to the individual, and the individual died from an overdose of that. So it does happen here in Plymouth. It happens more than probably most people think. But a great tool for the police department to have, in not only from a detection perspective, but from a wellness perspective of protecting the officers from opening the bag of a deadly substance that could harm the officers. And this device takes that all away from that. And it is the #1 device that's used by DEA today.
Correct.
Hey, just curious, what percentage of work you folks, drug-related overdoses, just a guess,
Of
50% of the work, or?
Oh, I don't know if it's 50%, but it's a lot of calls. So every time you go into a car or to a house or a residence, typically you find something, whether it's empty bags, whether it's, drug paraphernalia, packaging. And unfortunately, it comes in all shapes and colors now. So you used to be able to look at it and kind of know, and you just don't know anymore. And so we're taking our best guess of, should I put a mask on, or maybe I'm safe this time. So this takes all the guesswork out of it. I can tell officers there's no more handling it. You can put it in a bag, scan it, we know what it is, and we'll send it to the lab and prosecute it. And so safety-wise, it's definitely a step in the right direction for us.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Any public comments?
I just have a question. I think you just got at this, but is this a screening tool, or is this like will use of this support prosecution?
Yeah, so you still have to send it for court, you still have to send it to the state lab, but what it does is, if I found a bag of white powder on somebody, I can't arrest them. I can assume, I think I know what it is, but I'd have to wait to get it back from the lab. This, if we scan it and it says cocaine, well, that's enough probable cause. Now I can actually just arrest them on the scene, and it expedites everything as opposed to waiting a year, and now that person's going to be arrested in a year for something they had back in college. Some of them have careers, after college. And yeah, I remember that time, a year and a half ago, you got caught with a white substance. Well, it just came back from the lab and we have to arrest you. So this speeds everything up, and it'll be a great tool for us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other public comments?
Question. I apologize. I walked in late. I was teaching a class. What is the cost of this device? Is it the entire $39,000, or
That's the exact price. Yep, $39,900.
is that how much we got from the opioid settlement?
That's the exact check. Yep.
And I guess the secondary question I have is, I'm not sure of the procedures for the police. What is the procedure for carrying things like Narcan? Do we have Narcan and the Plymouth police carry Narcan at all? Or
We do carry Narcan for ourselves, so we typically wouldn't Narcan
we don't
someone
administer
else. But if
civilians?
another officer went down, we would use Narcan on that officer.
Is there any particular reason why we don't administer it to civilians?
Yeah, I mean, typically by the time we get there, the fire department's there with us and they do that.
Okay.
So we carry it in case of an emergency where if, I had to test something and I inhaled fentanyl and went down, the officers have it in the cruiser to run out and administer it to me.
Okay. But it's more of just a divvy of powers of you expect the fire department to.
Correct, yep.
Thank you.
Anything else from the public?
Great idea. The remainder of the monies that we were trying to get rid of at the county level, so congrats on pulling.
I
this in.
appreciate it. I'm thankful they supported us on this, and like I said, I sent this back in October and it just went through, so we're happy they did this for us.
Well, there goes the federal money.
That's right.
Seriously. Any other public comments? We don't have anybody online?
You got one,
Oh, there's a chat that has a little red mark on it.
No questions about this, Zach. I was having trouble listening to Scott during his report because Zoom has frozen. Scott's face was kind of like in a frozen state there, and I didn't hear who was running for the select board. That's what was knocked out of the conversation.
Oh, well, as soon as I close the public hearing, I'll go back to that and address it, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions on this topic? Looks like no. I will close the public hearing, 5:38.
All right, and I'll make a motion to accept the unanticipated funds from Grafton County opioid settlement funds for the amount of $39,900 for the purposes of purchasing the specialized equipment for detection of opioids.
Thank you.
I'll second. Oh, sorry, Mary.
Sorry.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Hey, thank
you
you
guys. Have a
for
great
being
night.
progressive
Thanks.
in
Thanks, Nate.
submitting the application for the grant. It will be
appreciate
a
it.
great tool for the town of Plymouth.
I agree. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
That's
You
great.
too, Nate.
Just to loop back for Dan Marion, there are 4 people running for the 2 open positions on the select board. Those people are Jason Ninos, Costa Alexandropoulos, Philip Lemereau, and Neil McIver.
Great. Thank you very much.
And that takes us to the Penny Baker TV policies and procedures. Happy to have you, Jonathan.
All right. Good evening. So a lot of these updates are just like things I thought were outdated. Our last update to the manual was July 2022, which is when Dan came on, and those were pretty minimal changes even when he came on. So I think I'll just read through the quick summary of the changes, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So, January 2025, 9th edition. Revised Section 1C definitions to include Castus Cloud. Revised Section 2C Electronic Community Bulletin Board to add expiration dates to submitted slides. Revised Section 2C Electronic Community Bulletin Board and Section 2E eligibility to include Section 2 eligibility to include information about sponsoring content. Revised Section 2O, post-production editing for clarification. Revised Section 2T, copies of programs, to include pricing for downloading content through Castus Cloud, as well as free copies to content producers. Revised Section 2A, program access scheduling priorities, to include content produced in New England and the USA, grammatical fixes. So if there's any questions about any specific element, I'd be happy to answer.
Do we get a lot of content submitted to the community bulletin board?
We do. We get stuff. We get monthly slides from Katie now. I get stuff from like people in the area who want to share things. The date for the expiration date for slides is because we have a lot of content. It's more like guidelines for me because we have on our rotator right now. We have some slides that are long outdated, like months have gone by, and it's just like. I want to be able to keep rotating content to keep things fresh and prevent it from coming stale. So it's just more guidelines for me to help manage it better.
I noticed that you added, you made some changes to the fees. You get a lot of requests for that?
Not typically. I added the free section for content producers because for instance, when we work with Louise McCormick from Memories of Plymouth, she usually wants a copy of the program to give to the people she interviewed. So in that instance, we do that. We don't get a lot of requests anymore for content from our channel necessarily. But I included it because it is a potential option for us.
How does that 50 cents per download work on the Castus Cloud content?
I do need to investigate that more, actually. 50 cents was just kind of a throwaway number at the moment. I have not had the chance because Castus Cloud has built-in billing information. It's just not filled out at the moment. So I need to investigate it a bit more, and then I can get more information about it in the meantime.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. Mm-hmm. If you're getting very rarely any requests,
yeah,
and 50 cents a download or even $5 for duplication, how much of your time do you take up to even investigate options to solve this problem and the billing that would have to be and the exchange of money? Is it really worth it is what I'm getting at.
Likely not. I just wanted to include it because it is an option just to cover bases if that were to happen. But ultimately, I'd be fine not including it in this if you thought it wasn't necessary.
Seems a little unnecessary to me if we're not getting a demand for it. And
yeah, I would feel differently if Jonathan was overwhelmed by the number of requests coming in or...
It's just one of those things is like, is the overhead, ask yourself, is the overhead of doing it worth it?
Yeah, because then you have to track it and audit it and all those sorts of things too.
So the only sentence that you're looking at right there, just to make sure we're clear, is the PBTV will charge 50 cents per download. We can still leave the $5 and the free. This is on page 11.
Yeah, page 11, just that's the one line.
Get rid of that one sentence.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Works with me.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Overall, I think this looks great.
So I'll make a motion to approve the revised PEMI Baker Television Manual of Policies and Procedures with the noted amendment.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Okay, signature file review.
Let me just see, make sure I got, not that one. All right, so I'm being asked to have members of the board, at least one of you, sign in blue. I don't know why. I think it's something to do with filing at the registry or making it so that we can tell the difference between original and copies.
Can we
Because
print
they
in
come
color?
out so clearly. All right, so this one here, this is 72 Yeton Road. We have an abatement request. The difference in value is $5,500 with the abatement, $138.16. It says Plymouth Village Water and Sewer has a 14 by 20 garage located at 64 Yeton Road, which is located at the bottom of the resident's driveway. They've been paying on this garage for many years, not realizing it until recently. This has been removed from their property card, and an abatement should be issued for this year. So, here's that one. The next one is 72 Ski Lift Lane. This is an approval, right? Yes, this is an approval of an abatement. $19,000 value difference, $477.28. The owner of 72 Ski Lift Lane filed an abatement on their property that contains a single-family residence based on an additional level of basement being added to the sketch on their property record card. The 2024 final value was $562,600. Basically, there was an extra sketch on that property that did not belong, so I need your signatures on that.
I'll borrow your blue pen.
I think Neil has one, right?
Oh,
Is yours blue?
What?
Your pen?
And blue.
I have a blue one.
We'll make sure we,
Use it?
Yeah,
here we'll
it's got
get at
blue.
least two in that way.
I say we do
Thank
4
you.
blue and 1 black.
yeah, you know.
So really confused now.
It's a pretty blue.
All right, so this property is a denial of an abatement. This is for 28 Main Street, 36 Main Street, 101 Boulder Point Drive, Suite 1, 101 Boulder Point Drive, Suite 2, Mid-State Community Development Corporation. The properties at 28 and 36 Main Street will be reviewed together, as the parking lot is for the building at 28 Main Street and had the same proration applied. The abatement application states that 28 and 36 Main Street was occupied by Midstate Health as of October 2023, when construction began to create a medical facility. The town agrees that Midstate began construction, was under construction as of April of '24.
Thank you.
For that data tax. The building and land and personal property of charitable organizations and societies organized, incorporated, or legally doing business in this state must be owned, used, and occupied by them directly for the purposes for which they are established. At this time, which would have been April 2024, that was not the case for the Midstate properties that are listed here. This is an application to deny this abatement.
Scott, did I sign the second page on that first one?
So I have an intent to excavate. Neil, please don't sign this when it comes to you.
Oh, okay.
This is for total acreage
Did that one.
52, and the property's on Loon Lake Road.
Better check it, make sure you sign both of those.
We have several veterans tax credits that are going to be coming around to the board. These are either new or updated veterans tax credits. And they have all been reviewed by the assessor and recommended. And there's one place to sign on each of those, please. Scott, I haven't seen too many abatements that have come in for the 24 year, have you? Yeah, maybe a couple, but
At the most 4.
yeah. So that's really good to hear. Going through those.
Not quite Mary Ann, but I'm getting there.
Time.
How many years did that take? Is that the last one?
There's no more coming from me.
That one.
I was just getting everything back, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, on to committee reports. Village Water and Sewer,
They will meet tomorrow night at 5 p.m.
Planning Board,
Okay. Yeah, I've got my report here. The planning board met on February 6th, and we reviewed our January 16th meeting and approved the minutes. The board recommended that Sue Wood be reappointed to the board. Mike Ahern is up for reappointment, and there was a motion to not make a recommendation, which failed 4-3. And the second motion was to recommend that he be reappointed, and it was 4-3, and it passed. We had a discussion of the HOP Round 2 contract. The funding has been authorized for $25,000, and Barrett Planning Group is selected to do that. There's going to be a spring planning conference, but they don't have a date for it yet. There was more discussion regarding housing chapter of the master plan. We need a chapter. The discussion felt that we needed a chapter on downtown, maybe another chapter on Tenny Mountain, and highway and economic growth, environmental studies, and the Tenny Mountain ski area. And that was a general discussion. Also funding for an possible industrial park. There's going to be a March 6th work session, and we're going to have an explanation of zoning amendments. That was the extent of our meeting.
in terms of the planning board appointments, we're going to discuss those on the 24th, so on the next agenda. And any board members who are interested in being well prepared for that conversation, I would recommend watching the first 35-ish minutes of the planning board meeting.
That was February 6th meeting.
February 6th meeting, yes. I'm assigning homework this evening.
Is this yours?
Look at you, A student.
This is yours or mine?
That is yours.
All right, Campus Community Council?
No report. I know that Scott reported out last time that there was a date,
April 28th.
April 28th, that they'd be coming here.
Perfect. And that takes us to school.
All right, so I'm gonna look from my notes here. The elementary school had a meeting on, what was it, I think it was the 6th?
Monday?
February 3rd.
February 3rd, sorry, thank you. They started out with a non-public. I believe in that non-public, they addressed some resignations that they did then report out on. Several. Let's see, and Anna Kobanov, Greg Bradley, Lori Clear, and Portland. I'm not really sure what that is. That was not it's actually a leave, and there was a nomination for someone to be a special education substitute teacher. They then went into the principal's report. They noted that there was a significant uptick in new enrollments since December 1st. I guessed that most of that increase is in the 7th grade. I'm not really sure why that is, but 7th grade. They talked about the winter concert that they had on January 7th. They talked about the 100th Day Museum that occurred last week on February 6th. The parent meeting on February 11th. That's tomorrow. And apparently there's a middle school dance for the SAU on the 14th. How appropriate. Also talked about the 4th grade wax museum on February 19th, and that the school break is from February 24th through 28th for winter break. And they also made note that the district meeting is on March 4th. There was some talk about co-curricular activities, roles and additions being assigned, art displays, and the PTA meeting that was to occur last Wednesday. On the privilege of the floor, there was some conversation about the federal administration policies, specifically around DEI, and whether those are at risk. The board didn't really know a lot to be able to respond to that, but they're going to be formulating plans to respond to those new policies and figure out what that really means to them. They then talked about the budget hearing, which was following this meeting, down in the cafeteria, which pretty much was the remainder of the meeting. There was some discussion about the increase in student enrollment on the impact of the budget. And then we'll go into the budget meeting. Basically, they detailed each line item for the public. The 1100 account, increase of $95,000. That's due to retirement, salaries, and other benefits. Special education, increase of $26,000 and change. Basically, the major aspect there is out-of-district costs have increased. Let's see, I'm looking for the notable things. And those are, transportation is also up. That's due to a new busing contract with Durham Bus Services. And most of the rest of the things, there weren't really significant changes. They did talk about the warrant articles, building repairs, that's $90,000. That's coming from their capital reserve funds. And they have a thing there to put $50,000 in to replenish those capital reserve funds. And then they reviewed and discussed the operating budget in detail. There weren't really a lot. I mean, it was a very quick after meeting. There wasn't really a lot going on there. There was some discussion about the resignation of a full-time educator and the impact on staffing and possibly replenishing that person into that new position that they created, if I remember the details correct. So that pretty much takes us through Plymouth Elementary School. Questions?
How much is their budget up?
I don't recall.
I remember, okay.
I don't recall. It was 3.8% or something to that effect. I don't remember the value.
Thank you.
Moving on to the high school. I'm going to zoom this up because I need to be able to see. 200%. I was not in attendance to the high school meeting because I was in class, but I did get a summary created from looking at the transcript. So they started out with budget hearing preparation, discussion on handouts and budget changes. They talked about emphasizing and reviewing the significant increases and decreases in the operating budget. Mentioned need to review the warrant articles and answer potential questions from the public. So the specific warrant articles they talked about at the meeting were the staff contract. That was the big one. Well, maybe not the big one. Install lights on the athletic fields, and then the general operating budget. So the details: regular education, decrease in the number of teachers due to enrollment changes. Special education, significant increase due to state mandates and out-of-district placements. SAU services, slight increase due to the formula changes, but not due to the staffing. Custodial services, increases due to general maintenance and staffing changes. Transportation, new bus contract, transportation of homeless students. And they did note that health insurance, they had some significant savings due to changes in health insurance policies. They had a couple of field trips, overnights for the Granite State Challenge and National Quiz Bowl competition. And let's see, public comments. There were comments from the public regarding the budget warrant articles that we're going to be followed up on in just a moment. And then the meeting adjourned. So the budget discussion was pretty much how you would imagine. They went through the line items. There weren't really a lot of questions about those. But when it came to reviewing the warrant articles, the dominant conversation piece was really about the funding for the athletic field lights. And that went on for quite some time, as Mary Ann and I can attest. There was a lot of people who were expressing concerns about the increase in cost. They spent a degree of time explaining how they were trying to defray that cost, which I think in earnest they are. Unfortunately, to this point in time, they only have, I think, roughly $11,000 committed to offset the roughly $749,000 ask in this budget.
Isn't that because they really don't have like the details to it for people to start really?
Yeah, I'm sure that once people can see the details, and then they might be able to line up funding. But unfortunately, due to the way the warrant is written, it's an all or nothing kind of approach. I will applaud the fact that they're putting it on the warrant, giving people the opportunity to have an opinion and vote on it. So that's a very positive. Several people, including Mary Ann, stood up and asked about the impact on taxes. I myself requested that they amend the warrant article to reflect the impact on taxes for each of the constituent towns, so that it would be just abundantly clear what the cost is. Apparently, it's very rare for someone to amend an article at that meeting. So we broke ground. Long story
Did your
short,
request for amendment pass?
yes, it did. Yes, it did. Sorry.
So
Yes.
how much is Plymouth's percentage of that 700 and,
I don't.
like 24%?
It's like 23 cents on 1,000 or something to that effect.
It's $23 on $100,000.
Yes, you're correct.
So, there is there is an impact, and this will be very clear to all the towns because they agreed to create that amendment. There were questions about how much it cost to lights, light the field for 4 hours. It's like $9 for 4 hours. Yes.
Do the proponents anticipate that there's going to be an increase in income from events?
My feeling is that they theorize that there will be, but, it's one of those things you can't really tell 100% until it's there. I believe someone in the audience actually did say, build it and they will come. I think they were being facetious, but, probably some, if they can hold some more evening games that might be accessible to, people who work, and have, concessions.
How
and
many
whatever.
different sports could play under the lights?
Mostly I remember hearing football, field hockey, soccer.
That was it.
Don't
Cross.
lacrosse. Okay.
Cross. Yeah.
So I mean that's
I mean, one of the fields is very multi-purpose, and one of the
Yeah.
fields is very
specific purpose.
specific purpose.
It's unlikely that they'll be, lacrosse is late enough in the spring that it's unlikely that they'll need it for lacrosse. The fall sports will benefit.
Yeah, as in spring it's getting lighter, in fall it's getting darker.
Yeah.
In spring you have to wait a little while for it to warm up enough where you can actually use the fields.
Hey, the ski jump was built pretty much by people donating.
Yeah, I worked on that.
Yeah.
There were questions that came up. It's like, why didn't you start a campaign to fund this before putting it on the warrant?
The ski jump was also a tenth of the cost. That was a $75,000 project, not a $750,000 project.
What a wet blanket.
A lot of volunteer labor.
There were other discussions surrounding, they did throw out that they looked at turf field, which would have been a lot more expensive, and this, if they're going to go to, offering things like a turf field or a track, this was the cheaper option of all of those things. I mean, there were people there that certainly did support the idea of putting lights on the field, but they were taken aback by the cost and really want there to be more of a fundraising component to offset that.
Right, without knowing the fundraising piece, I think a lot of people felt like, what am I agreeing to? I don't know why they couldn't change the verbiage. I didn't understand.
They talked about that for a good 40 minutes in a previous meeting about
Yes,
whether
they
or
did.
not they were
Right.
going to try to put verbiage in there that was clearer,
Yeah,
and this
I
is the
don't know
path
why.
they chose.
Right. Which,
Yep.
They didn't want to be in a position where if the taxpayers voted for it, it wouldn't happen. And I
yeah, doesn't make sense. Anyway.
agree.
And right now, the price that they have is tied to this year, so that's.
That's the other thing.
I mean, they could try next year and change their approach if it does. They will then know how many people are really willing to put some money to it.
I also was surprised, we've talked about this quite a bit. It's been surprising to me that they didn't try to do one field and then the other field, trying to do them both at the same time.
I guess that based on the previous meeting, it was far more cost effective to do them both at the same time. Because they're already here, they're already doing the work.
Yes.
That's what I recall. And that's pretty much the
All right.
summary of the.
Any other
meeting.
questions about high school or elementary school? Conservation.
Meets next week at the 18th at 7 p.m.
Capital improvement is at rest. LRPC,
No meetings.
Parks and Rec.
I have not seen any notes and no specific new meeting that I can recall.
Parking and economic development.
I'm sorry, sir.
Parking and economic development.
We will have Neil Cantor here on April 14th. To have a second conversation with him, and then we can regroup after with regards to what the first presenter gave us and what Neil provides us on the 14th.
Perfect. Energy Commission.
Okay, so, there's a meeting on, was it the 13th? And Ashley just forwarded the agenda out this afternoon. And essentially, it's PRHS Lighting Committee is going to join the Energy Commission, so we'll hear what they have to say. Updates and discussion, it's going to be 40 to 60 minutes, and it's going to include the IRA, Clean Energy New Hampshire Plan. And has that been resolved as far as the holdup of the monies?
No.
I thought they rapidly kind of changed.
There's a tentative agreement to allow the IRS tax refund, but it's not fully refined yet.
Okay. A rec update, low-income community bonus credit program update. This is very cursory, but energy codes and the warrant article. I'm not even sure what that is.
We're not.
Talking about for next year,
I think it would be for next one.
because there's no Energy Commission warrant article this year.
Library solar array, an update. Building committee update. And building audit update.
Yep.
And net zero intro. And any other topics that the community would like to input. That's it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Nothing from Advisory Budget Committee at the moment. PSU negotiations.
Hasn't kicked off yet.
Tentatively set for April 28th to start that conversation.
Chamber of Commerce. I think we meet this week. If it's not this week, it's next week. It's coming up. Perlac.
I went to the meeting.
Yeah, I was there
Remember it?
too.
Well, he remembers.
I didn't take any notes,
Oh, my
though.
goodness.
Crack team.
It was. What I really don't recall exactly what we did, to tell you the truth. It was so long ago. Relatively.
Yeah, nothing really big.
There you go.
Everything's fine with the river.
Yeah.
Police and
It was
fire.
quiet.
Meeting Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock in this room, the 12th.
Union negotiations.
Complete.
Complete. When do we start with the fire department again? I know
It's gonna be like next
Well-
summer.
summer. We start
Yeah.
summer. Okay.
Yeah, we'll probably start in July again, making sure we're in completion before the budget for 26-27 is completed.
I'm just going to quickly put the building meeting in my calendar here real quick before I.
I have
End
a
up
question
messing
for
up.
Ted.
Bill, are you making that
Where does
meeting on Wednesday?
conservation meet?
Right here.
Right here?
Which meeting?
Police and Fire Assessment Committee, Building Assessment Committee here
I'll be there.
on the 12th, you said at 3?
Yep.
Is yours, you're on that list with
So Wednesday at what?
3?
No.
Okay.
It's okay. I'll be there. Sorry, someone had a question for Ted?
Here, it was already asked.
Oh.
Answered.
Distracted by getting my calendar invite in. Anything else from the board?
Nothing.
Public comments? Yes, sir. Please approach the mic.
All right. So for those of you who
might have watched the planning board meeting already. You might have noticed I used some colorful language in opposition to the request for feedback. I wanted to explain that a little bit. It's been my understanding that, as this board discussed at the November or the January 27 meeting, it's been the policy to ask boards for recommendations when there are nominations up. I believe the only other nomination that's come to the planning board has been for seating an alternate, which I can understand why the board would request request feedback at that time. The nomination that came to the planning board for comment this time was for full members. I think it's a very difficult conversation to have, and I'm surprised. Honestly, I was expecting kind of a pro forma approval of the two members whose nominations were up, and I was actually surprised at the detailed level of discussion and the objection that was raised by the chair to one of the nominations. On a personal level, I would be happy to provide feedback one-to-one with any of the select board representatives, but I think it's really inappropriate to ask a board to come to consensus, especially when topics can be heated amongst members. There's been a lot of different perspectives on the planning board this year, and I really don't think it's the right thing to do. I know that John had agreed to that in the past, and the first time that this came up, I raised a voice in opposition to it, and I guess I'm here this time to bring that opposition to you, because I know it originates with you. But I do think, there were some topics that were brought up in this meeting. If you haven't watched the video or seen the minutes, there are some topics that were brought up that probably should be handled by this group in a non-public session. Excuse me?
I would recommend the board not to have a conversation on this until we have our meeting on the 24th.
And that's fine. That's fine. But that's my comment.
I just don't want the board to respond to that because it could require some legal action.
Right. Well, I think that legal action should be considered. I'm going to speak in support of the letter that John Chris, the chair, wrote about the behavior of and mannerisms of one of the members. And specifically, I believe there have been at least two, maybe three situations where right to know law has been.
Zach, I would ask you to shut this down, please.
This is a public comment, and technically, any comments on anyone else in the public or on a board, if they're actually serving on a board, it doesn't warrant non-public. So.
Essentially, it does. If you cannot go into a non-public session for someone on the board.
As chair, I'm going to allow this to continue just a moment longer, because I do think the rest of the board needs at least to hear just a minute more from Mr. Lemereau. I understand that there's concerns here and that we're up against some sensitive topics, but I am going to let Phil speak a little bit longer. Just because of his position on the planning board.
Other than to say, I think there were concerns that were raised. They're in the minutes of the planning board meeting.
And I did encourage this board earlier to make sure they
I
go and watch
appreciate
that first 30 minutes.
With regard to the vote in support of that nomination, I will note that the member in question voted, which he probably should have recused himself, and there was an alternate seated, and any number of alternates could have voted differently too. So it is a non-binding vote.
The topic that I'm most interested to hear from you, Phil, all that stuff's on the record, and we can review that. Yep. The part that I'm more interested to hear from you is your position against, or maybe the alternative approach of, if this board, if we get a request, right, from somebody to be nominated to a board. So what is a reasonable process for us to follow in vetting that candidate or vetting that person's reappointment?
I have the same question. There's no requirement that a member appointed to a planning board or a zoning board be competent in any way. You don't have to demonstrate knowledge of state RSAs or zoning ordinances, right? Like, there's no requirement for that, but You know, it's one thing. It's up to you. I mean, do you feel comfortable? I think, you know, there are times when, you know, I think the original request that came to us was for seating an alternate. And yes, the alternate had attended a few planning board meetings, but, you know, the board really, we don't have, you know, seating an alternate is tough because we don't really have a lot of interaction with them in that role. And once somebody's on the board, like reappointment, that, you know, their record should speak for them.
Yeah, so my 2 cents. I think that had I been the chair of the planning board, the way I might have approached that situation, you had one nomination in front of you that was obvious, and I think you could have said, I see unanimity in the reappointment of this person. Does everyone agree? And I think that there's some debate on this second person, and so we're going to just send it back to the select board to figure out.
And yeah, and that was the motion that failed.
And that was the motion that failed. Yeah, I understand. And so I think, honestly, in that particular instance, I think that maybe the chair should have approached that slightly differently. But I do think that it's valuable for us to ask a board, is this member of your board a valuable member of your board?
And I think that
But
you're going
that's
to.
hard.
Right. I mean, I think you're going to get.
But it's only hard when they.
Response. Yes.
It's only hard when it's a
contribute.
problem.
But when it's a problem, do you want to raise that question?
When it's a problem, I think the chair should say the board's not going to enter into a debate on this topic.
Right.
And that alone would cause the select board to then look more closely at the situation,
I would agree.
rather than actually engaging in an open debate.
Okay.
I mean, that would be my approach, but because I don't know what a better one is.
Well, and I think honestly, you know, as one of the signers of the petition warrant article to elect planning board members, I think that came up amongst in discussion in response to the first request for comment.
Which
from this
admittedly, and this is, I'm gonna speak as a citizen and not as chair of
That's
the
fine.
board on the
I welcome
on
that.
the topic of that particular warrant article. My concern on that warrant article is going to be the procedure around alternates.
So that's up to the board, and generally, most towns that do that have the board has approval to appoint alternates, and the board has approval. So you adopt rules of procedure to govern that, and most planning boards grant themselves the power to seat alternates, and then if there's a vacancy between elections, the board would have the authority to nominate an alternate to an interim seat until there's an election. And I think that would be, you know, if the warrant article passes, I would, as a member of the planning board, I would move to amend our rules of procedure to do that.
I can see where that makes a lot of sense. Like, so that process around nominations for replacing a vacant seat, I think that one's fairly straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
But the planning board, for anybody who's sat and watched planning board meetings, alternates get seated all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a rare instance in that case.
No, it's not.
It's very common that, you know, on any given night, you might have one or two alternates serving as a full member of the board in every given night. And so as soon as you move to that elected process, now you've got a chair that on any given night gets to choose from a pool of 5 people to decide what direction it's going to go in.
So there is-
I think
there-
that the
if I can-
particular challenge
Right.
that gets introduced once that's the case, and it becomes more politicized with elections, I think again, this is me speaking personally, I think the planning board is asking for real trouble moving to an elected process that we've avoided for a long time with a lot of decorum.
So there is guidance from the New Hampshire Municipal Association on that, and the guidance is that once on a particular topic, if a topic is being continued, they recommend that if an alternate had been seated in a previous meeting and there's a vacancy, that same alternate should sit for the purposes of continuity.
What if they're not even there? Because you
And
sometimes will
that's-
continue
yeah.
a hearing
Right.
3 or 4 times.
I think it's rare that decisions are anything other than unanimous when we come to approving things, but it's possible. But And it's possible that, you know, generally all of the alternates attend all of the meetings, which means they're all up to speed on any hearing, and any one of them could step in and be knowledgeable in voting if they were called upon to serve as an alternate in a voting role.
It's one thing to be knowledgeable, it's another thing to be knowledgeable in the context of a politicized position.
But it becomes the discretion of the chair to seat alternates, and you know, it's incumbent upon them to be consistent in who they seat when it comes to topics of continuations. So you might have a situation where, like, you had a continuation from 3 weeks ago where you seat one alternate and you might unseat them for the next hearing and seat a different alternate because he was appointed the next time. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is my understanding is that's the preferred way to do it, so that there's continuity of voice in that hearing. But I mean, we're getting
Definitely
pretty
increases
deep
the
into the weeds of what if.
Yeah. No, it just
but
increases the complexity of,
from my
of a board that's
perspective,
already fairly complicated.
Sure. From my perspective, I hope no one on this board is offended that this warrant article was brought up. This is not about any judgments or any action. You know, the work of this board is highly appreciated. Having lived in a town and served on a planning board where members are elected, I think it actually takes a lot of the weight off your shoulders to have an election. And the other thing that was discussed at the planning board meeting is that I think once we had this discussion, there was broad consensus amongst all the members of the planning board that there's always a question when planning board members are appointed and you have discussions, there's always a question about, is the board accurately representing the interests of the towns? Because appointed members, you know, if members are appointed, there's the perception that maybe there's a thumb on the scale appointing more people on one side than another. Whereas if members are elected, the townspeople have chosen who's there to speak for them. And I think that's actually a better solution.
Maybe.
I think
We'll
it's
agree to disagree on that, Phil, but that's okay.
So I think I saw nods of agreement from people I didn't expect when we discussed that. So anyway, that's all I have to. Oh, there is one other thing. Was there a permit for excavation that came around?
Yes.
So I believe the planning board has to issue a permit before the town can do that under RSA 155E. Their earth excavations require permits, they require closure plans, sometimes they require bonding. I think that should be, I'm not, if that hasn't been addressed, I think those should go to the planning board before
I will
the
look
select
into
board
that.
authorizes that.
And we'll hold it if I need to.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other public comment?
Mr. Ninos.
Jason Enos, resident of Plymouth. Following up on what Phil has brought up with the solicitation, the select board solicitation of feedback on appointment to, you know, at least the planning board or various other boards. You know, I don't completely disagree with Phil on soliciting the feedback from the planning board. You know, as you can see or have seen, it got rather contentious, and I think, you know, Chairman, you've asked about, you know, what's another way to do this, and I don't think it would be unheard of to, you know, anybody who nominates himself or asks to be on a board, come to the select board where you all can ask questions of them yourselves to make an informed decision. You know, having the current board, the planning board, or any other current board provide feedback can only do so much. I don't think it's unwarranted for any appointments or any requests for appointments that come in. You know, one of the requirements they come talk to select board directly in a meeting, so you all can provide those questions. And I think that kind of alleviates that problems of the planning, you know, a board being a planning board or other committee being a sticky situation of having to non-recommend a member or, you know, a current member. And additionally, the select board can solicit, you know, comments on nomination process when, you know, the member comes to address the board and address your question. So I think that would be possibly a compromise to this situation.
I can tell you that other towns have an interview process where there's 2 members of the planning board and there's members of the select board, and they do just that. They sit down, interview them, and then a decision is made by the select board.
And that's for reappointments as well, or?
That is for new appointments and alternate appointments.
I don't think it'd be a bad process for reappointments either, you know. And then once again, if a reappointment is before a select board, you know, members of the public can, you know, correspond with the select board to voice their displeasure or, you know, approval of reappointment of that member.
In the case that you just suggested, you'd still have planning board members.
As part of the interview process.
Right, and so they still would have to go on the record with, you know, a recommendation.
Right.
So you don't necessarily completely avoid that problem.
Right.
Right.
Right, you don't avoid the
But that's one
contentious-
process. I mean, we don't necessarily have to have members of the planning board. The, you know, planning board, you know, members of the planning board can provide correspondence just like any other member of the public can do. And once again, they can, you know, the appointee can come to the select board meeting and be up for questioning to the select board. We don't, that is a solution that you propose, but doesn't mean that's a solution that Plymouth has to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would prefer a recommendation, in this case from the planning board. You're more involved, more knowledgeable. This particular, you know, maybe the contention, it could have been alleviated a bit if it was addressed in an ongoing way.
And I don't deny that, but once again, you know, this is one instance of it. You know, we don't know how many other instances in the future there might be, and I don't disagree. I question how the chairman of the planning board expressed and ran that portion of the meeting. But once again, you know, we can think of ways to future-proof this, so it is less contentious, and the select board can get the information that they're requiring and understanding the viability of a candidacy for an appointment.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be honest, having watched other meetings, not so much Plymouth, I've seen other meetings much more contentious, to the point of it obviously shouldn't have got there. So although contentious, but I didn't have a huge problem with it. Interesting, but.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
One more thing?
Zach, do you want to hear
Dan has.
Oh, go ahead.
do you want to hear my feedback on that February 6th planning board meeting, or is that not appropriate at this time?
I think if your feedback is in relation to process, I'm interested. If it's in relation to the particular conflict that occurred on the 6th, then probably I would encourage you to not engage in that part.
Okay, then I stand muted. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
The only thing I wanted to bring up is, regardless of how planning board members come to their position, whether they're appointed or elected, the removal process, the authority for removal is the same and it rests with this board.
All right. With that, I think we're done with our
Actually,
public.
I'm going to throw in a comment about that,
Sure.
since everyone's making comments, but,
Yes.
and I won't even get into, you know, as far as like voting versus appointment, but one appointed planning board member is from the board. And, you know, lately, I mean, for the past maybe 6 years, it's been, you know, very nice. Someone gets on the board, wants to be on the planning boards, and okay, and it was kind of like a, you know, a half-handed vote, and you're on. In the past, it's been very contentious. And I don't know if you recall, Neil, but
Contentious in terms of which select board member
Yeah.
gets appointed
Yeah.
to the planning board? Yeah.
yeah, so there was you know, blocks that form, and you know, board members you know, fly in the face of. So that should be something that you should consider, just in the backs of everyone's minds. It might rear its ugly head again. Not with this board, but.
Or with you.
This particular board's got, 2 meetings left? 3 meetings left?
Motion to go into non-public?
Let's do it.
Motion to go into non-public accordance, with accordance to RSA 91-A:3, number 2, letter E.
Thank you.
Thank you
See
both.
guys.
Second.
Good to see you. Neil, your vote.
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
Zach? Aye. Bill?
Aye.
Ted?
Aye.
Thank you, Jason.